This is an exploration of sound effects in music. In this video, we will explore how the evolution of recording technology has enabled composers to be able to utilize a larger variety of sounds and effects in their music, contributing to a more dynamic immersion for the audience, especially for media like film and video games. Sound effects have been around in music for a long time. Some early examples are Tchaikovsky's use of cannons in his iconic 1812 Overture, which you're hearing playing in the background. As technologies developed and the tape machine was invented, more composers like Bela Bartok were able to utilize these recording strategies in their compositions, using field recordings and later sampling to expand their creative tools available to them. After we explore a brief overview of some history and development of recording and sampling technologies, we're going to look at the soundtrack from Call of Duty World War II and the composer Wilbert Roget II's use of samples, sound effects, and digital audio processing to create engaging works that complement the game's situations and immerses the players.
This day we set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our civilization and to set free a suffering humanity. Our sons, pride of our nation, lead them straight and true. Their road will be long and hard. Men's souls will be shaken with the violences of war. In this hour of great sacrifice, we shall prevail.
Music in film and other digital media, like video games, is designed to immerse the audience in the world of what they are watching or playing. Star Wars is a great example. It has one of the most recognizable scores and would be an entirely different movie without it. Not only would it be less engaging, but the storytelling would drastically change. The final scene of Star Wars Rogue One demonstrates an iconic example of the interplay between sound effects and music. The villain, Darth Vader, is revealed by the sound of his blade emerging from the hilt of his lightsaber, cueing the start of the music. As the scene continues, Darth Vader's wielding of his lightsaber deflects blaster shots in time with the music in the background. Music and sound are also used to convey mood and tone. A tragic scene would likely feature very somber or sad music playing, like rain falls to someone crying, or sometimes even silence to emphasize those emotions. In a high-octane action sequence, sound designers and composers are likely to add fast, intense, and even chaotic sound effects and music. Looking at Call of Duty World War II, the sound accentuates the intensity and wide range of emotions of the game. Due to the action-packed intensity that is the nature of the video game, the soundtrack employs a number of different effects to match the tone of the scenes and scenarios. Reflecting the events of a real and serious historical period, the soundtrack of Call of Duty World War II has a very dark tone. The composer creates an intense, eerie, patriotic, and somber soundtrack, immersing the players by utilizing period-accurate sound effects. While sound effects in a video game are often separate from the music, they both serve the purpose of shaping mood and tone of the scene. Composers are able to use sound effects within their compositions and scores to add even more immersion. Video games share a similar relationship between music and sound effects to film. However, sound designing can be challenging due to the fact that the player is in control. In an interview with the lead and senior sound designers of the video game Halo Infinite, Kyle Fraser and Robbie Elias, they articulate the challenge of sound design in video games when the player's next moves are unknown. In a way, the players are involved in the composition of what happens based on what their next actions are. They not only influence the music they play, but the sound effects of the environment and the characters around them as well. In the same interview with Fraser and Elias, they discuss how specific sound effects and soundtracks serve to provide players with situational cues. For example, in Halo Infinite, a distinct metallic typewriter sound effect accompanies gunfire, signaling the need for reloading. When a player is low on ammo, a similar design is used in Call of Duty World War II, where the weight of the gunfire diminishes subtly to indicate low ammunition. It's very subtle though. Additionally, many games utilize ominous themes that create suspense to signal danger or the occurrence of a significant event within the game's world, such as the appearance of a tank on the battlefield. This use of contextual audio cues serve to deepen player immersion in the gaming experience, similarly to introducing a new section or element in a musical composition.
After tracing the trajectory of technological advancements in audio production, it is also evident that alongside the evolution of digital tools and synthesis techniques, that the practice of field recording has emerged as an important component in shaping musical narratives. Capturing non-musical sounds from the environment and using them in a musical fashion, field recordings have witnessed a surge in popularity from the early 2000s to present day, particularly in experimental music. An example of this can be found in Tesseract's The Arrow, where we can hear somebody speaking an old nursery rhyme to their grandson in Arabic at the end of the song. Field recordings can play a crucial role in enhancing immersion as well by introducing sounds like glaciers cracking, soldiers marching, or cannon blasts as percussive effects. Moreover, the versatility of field recordings lies in the post-processing effects that can be applied, such as obscuring the audio to add mystery or enhancing clarity for better discernment. One of my favorite examples of a field recording in experimental music is from Tesseract's Luminary, where they use a door squeaking and modulate it to obscure it as the intro to a song. Examples of field recordings in contemporary art music in the 21st century can include music such as Jana Windren's Energy Field or Chris Watson's Eltran Phantasma, where in Energy Field the recordings were entirely field recordings and then arranged into a musical narrative. And with Chris Watson's Eltran Phantasma, he recorded audio of trains going through tunnels along with all the different noises that trains can make and arranged them in a musical way. While field recording technology has enabled composers to experiment with sounds and creativity in new, exciting ways, the mass adoption of technology has given composers extensive tools to enhance creativity and experiment with music. Notably, reverb. Reverb is a sound that we're all familiar with as musicians. It's the effect that we refer to when we say a concert hall is wet or dry sounding. For example, my voice right now is very dry, but if I apply a reverb effect and crank it, it can now appear that I'm speaking to you from a tunnel or a concert hall, despite being in my room. It's a very uncanny effect when used in this scenario. As you can see, this accessibility to effects and modulation has paved the way for experimentation with extended reverbs, contributing to the immersive qualities of musical compositions and samples across various media forms. Wavetable synthesis and granular synthesis were also monumental to allowing composers to write more and more music without having to refer to a live band to see how it sounds. Wavetable synthesis specifically is known for versatility in shaping musical timbres. So with just a sine wave that comes from the synthesizer, you're able to manipulate it using oscillators to sound like various instruments. For example, you can make it sound like a drum snare or a clap, Actually, wavetable synthesis is where 808 drum sounds came from in modern pop music. It has almost eliminated the need for live musicians when writing a piece, because you know when you're writing it with playback that it's going to sound good in the end, and then you can save recording for once the musicians are all practiced up on the music. Similarly to wavetable synthesis, granular synthesis was originally developed for practical purposes and has evolved into a powerful tool for creating unique textures and soundscapes in music. The best way to describe granular synthesis is that you take a snippet of audio, maybe me clapping my hand, or maybe just a short 100 milliseconds of a piano, and what a granular synth is able to do is chop that audio up into thousands of little bits known as grains, and these grains can then be manipulated and reformed to turn the audio into something new entirely. A great use of it is actually when experimenting with modulation or reverb sounds. You can use it to create pitched reverbs almost, such as pads, or modulate background music to create an almost washy texture. This synthesis technique, although often used in the background, contributes to the richness and depth of musical compositions, enabling a wider range of sounds that can be played in a composition.
Alright, moving on to an analysis of some of Wilbert Roget II's work in Call of Duty World War II. As the composer of the soundtrack, Wilbert Roget used a variety of non-traditional sounds, such as prelays, in order to add a new texture and a new vibe, essentially, to his composition style. Roget's use of prelayed sounds over the ensemble leads the ensemble through specific melodic passages that I'll discuss briefly. These pre-recorded segments amongst his pieces are referred to as prelays, and what prelays are pre-recorded sounds, usually consisting of solo passages or different textural components of a piece, and they usually lead the piece into different sections. Different effects can be put into place into prelays, especially, such as reverb is very common. By recording segments in advance, composers can ensure that certain components of their composition can be concrete and solid when they get to playing with the actual orchestra or ensemble per se. So now we're going to speak a little more specifically about some real use of these prelays and instrumental sounds. The first example we'll talk about is in Wilbert Roget II's Home Suite. And in the Home Suite, in measure 7, there is an impactful prelay that is trying to emulate a dulcimer, which is a plucked-like instrument, and it's essentially, it leads the piece into this mysterious, tension-filled introduction, and this motif that the prelay establishes follows on throughout the song, minimally, but throughout the album there are a few points where that motif comes back, and that's some of the incredible power of Wilbert Roget II's compositional style, is that he's able to bring different things from different pieces and make one cohesive album that brings everything together. Moving on, we'll talk a little bit about A Brotherhood of Heroes. Now, in this recording specifically, we're going to talk about the introduction as well. And it's another use of prelays, but in a different kind of context. Now, in this specific context, there's a trumpet entrance that is echoing the beginning of war, it sounds like. And over top of these powerful trumpet echoing lines, we have this, it's almost like a blaring siren that's just signaling tension, and it really carries this piece into the environment of World War II. One other example that I'll talk about briefly is Wilbert Roget II's piece titled The Shadow Under the Mountain. In this piece, there are more examples of prelayed sounds and melodies that are used to immerse the listener into the game's environment. In the opening, much like the other ones discussed, echoes resembling the sounds of distant bombs whistling add to the sense of anxiety and fear, transporting the listener into the heart of the battle. These carefully crafted soundscapes demonstrate Roget's mastery in utilizing non-traditional instrument sounds and sampling to enrich the music of the Call of Duty World War II soundtrack. Now, in an interview, Roget revealed, and I quote, Instead of using snare drums or typical orchestral percussion, I designed rhythmic elements based off of the sounds of historical tanks, steam trains, explosion debris, and other audio sources from that era. Roger also stated, I also incorporated sound design within the musical soundscape as well. Our audio director sent me some of the game's authentic World War II vehicle and weapon sounds, which I then processed and used as part of the orchestra, taking the place of traditional percussive instruments like cymbals and tam-tams. This musique concrète technique helped to give the score a unique texture, closely identifiable with the setting. So as we've seen, Wilbur Roger has really implemented the use of non-traditional orchestration tactics by using prelays and other odd instrumentations, and this has really reinforced his abilities at exploring different textural sounds and different aspects of musical composition.
So, to recap, we've discussed a couple points around sampling and the evolution of audio recording, culminating in a better understanding of how composers can use non-traditional instrument sounds in their music. Each of us, through the research for this video and paper, have certainly concluded that the integration of sound effects into music really heightens the impact music can have in media and adds a whole new dimension that is still relatively young. But what do you think?